Behind me is the French city of Caen, the capital of Normandy. In front of me is Sword Beach, and it was here on the 6th of June that the British plans to capture the city of Caen on D-Day started to come undone. The Germans knew it as Widerstandsnest 17, Resistance-Nest 17, but the British knew it as Hillman. So welcome to this episode of WW2 Wayfinder, and today I am in the British sector just behind Sword Beach, and it was here at Hillman, at this German position here, Widerstandsnest 17, that the 1st Battalion of the Suffolk Regiment would come up against the exceptionally strong defences here at Hillman, causing the delay on that push for Caen. Now, today the site is an open-air museum, and I'm just going to have a look around, tour the places, show you what's still here, what can be accessed, and some of the unique features here when it comes to German bunkers. The complex here at Hillman is quite interesting if you like German bunkers, because they have one very rare type of bunker here, an R605 or Regelbau, like standard design 605. And what that was designed to do was house 2 anti-tank guns, 2 Pak-40s on either side, and then in the centre have the crew quarters when they were off duty. Also had a Tobruk fort as well for a machine gun to defend that particular position. So this is the first bunker that you see when you get to Hillman, and this is the R605 or the Regelbau 605 type. I can see those 2 big doors on the side that's facing the camera. They were designed to house Pak-40 guns, so anti-tank guns that could be wheeled out but kept safely in the event of Allied bombardment. And in the centre, through that now modern door, that was the crew quarters for those men who would be in charge of the Pak-40 guns. They had somewhere to rest that was safe and would protect them from any aerial attack. But of interest, as we walk around the site here, this building, this bunker, was also capable of its own defence using this Tobruk position here. You can see from this position here, from this Tobruk fort, that lots of potential to defend the site with great fields of fire around this position. Right, now I've got the difficult job of trying to get back out from what is a really tiny position. I definitely don't think the Germans were quite as tall as me back in 1944. Now, it's really quite something to see the coast and the English Channel out there behind me. It's only about 3 kilometres away, it's just under a couple of miles, and to think of the task that the British Infantry had for 8th Brigade of British 3rd Infantry Division coming ashore at Sword Beach on the morning of D-Day. Now, a lot of critics will always cite that Montgomery was useless, that he was over-ambitious on D-Day to try and capture Caen. Now, to quell a couple of those myths, and I very much share the thoughts and views of well-known historian James Holland and his co-host Al Murray on the We Have Ways of Making You Talk podcast. And essentially the view from their perspective, and I wholeheartedly share this, is that clearly Monty didn't set Caen as a D-Day objective. That was done by Dempsey, the commander of the British Army that went ashore here. Remember, Montgomery was commander of all land forces for D-Day. And that 10-mile objective was born out of Dempsey's experience in Sicily when he was the 13th Corps commander. And one of their objectives on that D-Day for the operations in Sicily was 10 miles inland from the beaches, and it was achieved. And what we also have to remember is that if the phase line for the end of D-Day was set that just get off the beach, get a mile or so inland, then had they achieved that by, say, 9 a.m. in the morning, having come ashore at, or the landing starting at 07:25, that is where the infantry would have stayed, because that was their goal for the day. By setting Caen as an objective, yes, was it unachievable? Well, it turns out clearly it was. But what it did mean was the forces coming ashore, 8th Brigade, the follow-up brigade like 185 Brigade, they kept pushing south. They kept pushing towards Caen in an attempt to get the city. Now, clearly it took another month for Caen to fall into the Allied hands, but this wasn't down to Montgomery. It was Dempsey's idea. Okay, Montgomery signed off on it, but he had a whole team of planners and men underneath him that were responsible for developing this plan. You also have to remember as well, Sword Beach was a very narrow beach. There were only 2 possible landing sites to get the forces ashore there, not like Omaha or Utah that were much wider. This was all down to the geographical makeup of the beach and the terrain underneath the sea. So that was a limiting factor as well. So all of those people who are watching this thinking that Montgomery was to blame for the British lack of capture of Caen on D-Day, well, I hope that has helped to set the record straight and to dismiss some of the myths that surround the British attempts here on D-Day. So now I've just come to the western side of Hillman, and this is Command Bunker B. This was an R608 type bunker, Regelbau 608, so standard design, and sadly it's partly closed off, but we can still get an idea of what the position here was like. This would have been the entrance into the bunker, and we can see there's a machine gun port that would have greeted any attackers trying to breach this position from this direction. And that was if they were lucky to get past that embrasure down there that would have had most likely an MG34 in that position to take out any infantry as they assaulted down into this part of the bunker itself. We can get an idea as well just how thick the concrete was here, how well reinforced it was from ground level coming down into this position. Now as we climb back up the steps, there's some of the original trench network here that the Germans would have used to access the site, and then no doubt as well the men of the Suffolk Regiment, when they attacked here on the 6th of June 1944, that they would have used this network to remain below ground level to try and keep out the way of the German positions when they finally got into the site here, for those Germans that were still manning the Tobruk forts, so getting out of the way of that small arms fire and any artillery fire coming down onto the site. So the site here at Hillman covered 24 hectares. Construction started in 1942 and was still ongoing by the time D-Day rolled around on the 6th of June 1944. For example, the 2 doors that should have covered the pack emplacements on the R605 bunker hadn't been installed yet. But for all intents and purposes though, from a fighting position, Hillman was very much ready to go when D-Day occurred on the 6th of June 1944.
wenigen Sekunden sind die Geschütze getarnt und die Mannschaft ist in Deckung gegangen.
So heading over to Command Bunker A now, the other R608 type bunker on the site, and this was where Oberst Ludwig Krug would have had his headquarters during his time here as part of the commanding officer for the 736th Grenadier Regiment of the 716th Static Infantry Division that was manning this site, as well as the site further to the north at Morris. And before we get there, I just wanted to look at one other feature. This is the former water reservoir for the site. And you can see just how big it was. This meant that the site was essentially self-sufficient. The men didn't need to go off-site to get water, to sustain themselves, and for any other purposes. So it really did mean that these bunker complexes, because the Germans had so long to construct them, were well thought out and were able to hold out for at least a determined period of time, albeit the Germans thought that the armoured counterattack would then come and drive the Allies back into the sea if it were to happen here in Normandy, but clearly, in reality, it only lasted for a matter of hours. And we can see the view through the trees here as I walk forward. Just what a dominating view Hillman had over the approaches that the British infantry and armour would have had to have made toward this position. You can see the coast out there as well, and just what a commanding position this site had. Behind me here are some of the beach obstacles that were commonplace all along the invasion beaches in Normandy. Most commonly thought of when we think of the depiction of Saving Private Ryan and that 30-minute invasion scene at the start of the film. But here we can really get up close and take a good look at what it was that the Allied landing ships and landing craft had to face when they were coming up on the beach. We've got to remember as well that these would often be mined as well. Not only were they presenting that physical obstacle, but they also had that explosive charge on them as well, creating a real hazard for the naval crews that were bringing the infantry, engineers and other troops ashore on D-Day.
Where I was, it wasn't too bad getting ashore. After that it started. We had to fight for every bloody field. It was the same each time. Crawl on your belly, keeping your backside down like you'd been told, chuck in a few hand grenades, then rush them. Sometimes they killed us, but we were killing more of them. The trickiest part was the farms. They were regular little jerry fortresses. If we couldn't manage them on our own, then we'd have to wait while the company commander called back for artillery support. The Navy was still with us too, chucking in shells ahead of us. In 3 days we advanced 7 miles. Then we were told to stand fast and dig in. Next morning we heard the news. We got it from the BBC. It sounded great. We'd joined up all along the bridgehead. There was a solid line, 45 miles of it. We'd got a foothold. We were in.
Now this is one of the original access points into the trench network, but you'll notice that above there is a concrete crossing point, and this was to allow vehicle access through the site for the Germans, but yet allowing the men to still access the trench positions that connected all of the different gun emplacements and observation points throughout the site. And today, as we walk through here, you can see the sides, they've got the sandbags in place now. These are all filled, they're there to last, unlike the wartime ones that would have just been filled with dirt. These are filled with concrete, but it really does give you an impression of what the site was like here in 1944. Now, one important feature for all soldiers, and the old saying of the army marches on its stomach is very true, and this was the old cookhouse for the Germans when they were here from 42 to 44. Better known by the German soldiers as the Gulaschkanonen, this was where their meals would have been prepared by their cooks and then brought forward to those different positions around the site. Unfortunately, because of the hard work here of the volunteers that maintain this site here at Hillman, it's possible to actually get through here and have a look at the facilities. And here we can see in the kitchen, the table laid out, ready for the meal, and all the other kitchen stuff used in the preparation of the food there. Fantastic display by the volunteers here at Hillman. So this is Command Post A, the other R608 type bunker here on the site. And this is the one that you can get full access to here if you come and visit the Hillman site. You can see there the sign that says Grenadier Regiment 736 Command Post Oberst L. Krug. That was for the colonel that commanded this site here. Sadly, it's actually closed off in here, but it's just able to get a little bit of a better view around than we were at Command Post B. Some of the facilities that would have kept the bunker supplied with power and with water, all the essentials that was needed to maintain this place, especially after it had come under attack. Again, we get a really good idea here of the embrasure that would have had an MG-34 most likely manning that position, ready to engage any soldiers as soon as they started down into this complex. And then the other there, if they'd managed to silence that first one, that they would have to deal with when trying to access the bunker here. One thing we can look at though from this bunker is another Tobruk fort here, and I personally really enjoy climbing in these. It's that real tactile sense of history that you can get from exploring these bunkers. And this one in particular is fantastic because it still has the locations marked out of the different villages and their distances to them, and the unique identifying features such as Le Deliveron there with the two spires of the church, Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer, nearly 10 kilometres away, it's nearly 6 miles, and then the other buildings. And this is just fantastic to see this original artwork, as I suppose you'd call it, by the Germans. It's beautifully preserved. And that's the view that they would have enjoyed. You can see the twin spires there in the distance. Hopefully the camera can pick it up. But just to give you that idea of the excellent view they would have had of that massive invasion force on the 6th of June 1944.
It was a funny sort of feeling marching down to the ships. We'd done it plenty of times before, of course, on schemes and that kind of thing. They didn't tell us this was the big show. Might have been just another exercise. Some of the chaps cracked gags. They wasn't very comic, but we laughed. I think we all guessed. The general feeling was, okay, if this is it, let's get in there and get it over with. Waiting always got on my nerves. Even waiting for a bus, never could stand it. Well, after a bit, our ship found its place in the middle of all the rest of the stuff. there we stayed for days.
So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of World War II Wayfinder here from Widerstandsnest 17, Hillman site as it was known to the British. If you have, please don't forget to like the episode, comment and consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. Okay, thank you for watching and I'll see you all in the next one.